Okay, I'm really excited for this Facebook Live. We are going to talk about things your doctor will not tell you. How do I know that? Because I know he or she is not studying this. They are not aware of this. They're not taught this. They don't practice this. It's not on their radar. And what we're going to be talking about is why your doctor doesn't know how to fix your adrenal fatigue, your stress response, and your neurotransmitter imbalances, aside from offering you a pharmaceutical approach. And what they're doing now is they're doing DNA samples. In fact, 23andMe is happy to announce that they are focusing their efforts on learning how your genetics will impact the best medications to take. Not the best supplements, not the best lifestyle, not the best nutritional protocols, but the best medications to take. So it's not on their radar to look into something that's not even accepted in traditional medicine. Adrenal fatigue is not accepted. It's a terrible definition. Let's agree on that, because the adrenals don't exactly fatigue. They are able to mount a response no matter how exhausted and burnt out they are, unless it's an Addisonian type thing where you have an autoimmunity. But the problem is that if you don't have an autoimmunity and they do an ACTH test and your adrenals mount a very minimal response, in the very least, it's not going to be considered a adrenal insufficiency problem. However, so many other things can go wrong. Your brain doesn't necessarily produce ACTH from the pituitary. So to give someone ACTH in order to see if the adrenals respond is assuming that your brain's producing ACTH. I mean, you can't just make that assumption, right? I mean, it's my health. Number two, what happens if the adrenals are making a bad quality hormone, or there's too much of a free fraction because it can't get into the cell because it's or there's too much of a bound problem, or the cells are not receiving, there's no receptor sites, or there's a lot of other medications going on, or there's lots of inflammation, or there's lots of GI disturbances, or the liver's not detoxing, then your adrenals are not going to be adequate even if they're producing adequate amounts. So the term adrenal fatigue is a terrible definition, but with that being said, your doctor doesn't accept it as a legitimate thing where a lot of things are going wrong in your body. And then one of the main things that happens is your stress response. And namely your neurotransmitters, right? Our neurotransmitters are our brain's communicating messengers. That's really what it means, neurotransmitters. And it communicates messages with the rest of the body, where it doesn't just work in isolation by itself, whereas specialists do, and neurologists and gastroenterologists and endocrinologists and orthopedists and rheumatologists are all specialized. And there's no such thing as transmitting, because that would mean you'd have to talk to the rest of the body. And so I'm really disappointed with the way that healthcare is headed, with the fact that these specialists don't talk to each other. But that being said, neurotransmitters are your communicating messengers of the body that have to deal with stressors. And when we have enormous amounts of stress in our today's day and age, from bills to finances to taxes to occupations to relationships, to demanding family members and children and parents, careers and multiple careers, and too much work with too little pay, and too much obligation with very little downtime. That's not even looking at your environmental exposures, pesticides and plastics and estrogen disruptors and glyphosates and chemicals and medications and heavy metals all in your waters. And not to see like the skies falling, but the minerals in the foods and the pathogens and the xenobiotics, they're worse than ever, and plasticizers and glyphosates and so many things going wrong with the environment that it really messes up your ability to mount a good stress response. So anyways, my name is Dr. Joel Rosen. I am the Adrenal Fatigue Recovery Ninja. And today I want to talk to you about why your doctor doesn't know how to fix your adrenals, your stress response, or your neurotransmitter imbalance. And the first thing we talked about is they're not accepting it as a legitimate diagnosis, this. It's not being taught in schools. It's not on the curriculum. And quite frankly, it's not part of the algorithm on pharmaceutical solutions. Really, that's what it comes down to. So what I wanted to talk to you about, though, were 5 main things that you can look at yourself and doctors can learn in order to apply this. And the first one would be iron metabolism. Iron metabolism is number 1. Our iron enriched, someone came up with the ingenious idea to put iron filings and enrichments in our foods so that we can have a healthier population. For the draft, which I don't remember the last time there was a draft, but either way, this has stuck, and now we're seeing iron overloads at crazy amounts, and that creates a lot of oxidative stress. It creates a lot of hydroxyl radicals, which is basically overloaded, oxidized Fenton reaction of iron. In English, that means burning in the body. It means lipids and membranes combusting, burning up and bursting up, and not having really anywhere to transmit a message. And it creates a lot of inflammation, which, as you know, your stress response system and your brain and your hypothalamus and your pituitary and your adrenals are responsible for dealing with that inflammation. The adrenals make your body's natural anti-inflammatory cortisol or cortisone in order to deal with inflammation. And if you have iron overload, then you have inflammation. And so I want to tell you that what Ive been researching is, for males, 50 to 75 is an ideal way for your ferritin, your stored iron, or your iron sequestration services of the body that sees all this excess iron and sequesters it from creating oxidation and Fenton reactions and inflammation and peroxidation, all these fancy words, should be 50 to 75 for males, and should be 20 to 40 for females. So go on your test and see if you're higher than that. I just went over a report just a couple moments ago, and his ferritin was really high. And that's going to create hydroxyl radicals. That's going to deplete your methyl groups. It's going to impact your ability to make your neurotransmitters. On the flip side, there are instances where there's a lot of iron deficiencies as well. Very few and far between where it's a pure iron deficiency, because what I'm seeing is even people that have low ferritin, it's not so low, right? 50 to 75 for males, 20 to 40 for females. I'm finding that their serum iron is low, right? Usually 85 to about 130 is what we want to see. And they may be in the 50s, but their ferritin isn't low, but their RBCs, their hemoglobin, and their hematocrit is really high. So is that iron deficiency? If their majority of the iron in the body that's transported in the blood is excessive? I don't think so. It's not. So now when I see someone that has really high ferritin levels, it's suggested that they give blood, especially if we don't see anemia, we don't see low red blood cells, we don't see low hemoglobin, low hematocrit. But on the ones that are supposedly deficient, when you look at their red blood cells, hemoglobin, hematocrit, they're actually high from a lab range or from a functional range. I don't necessarily suggest giving blood, but at the same time, I don't suggest giving iron either, right? Because that's just going to feed the fire. So that's a huge, huge problem that I urge you to look into, because iron is part of the equation to make your neurotransmitters. It's a necessary ingredient. And if we have pathogens, if we have pancreatic insufficiency, if we have parasitic activity, all of that is going to be harboring your iron in the GI tract. And of course, if there's genetic SNPs, that's going to create a perfect storm. So iron, and doctors aren't going to look at any of that, right? They're not going to look at the functional ranges. They're not going to look at biopterin, BH4, that's going to be making iron and combining with iron into your neurotransmitters. It's not going to be looking at the polymorphisms. There's no such thing as adrenal fatigue. It's not going to be seen. It's just not. It's not going to be helped. The only way that it's going to be seen is if we get you on Prozac or we get you on some kind of mood stabilizer, which I could say could be helpful, but it's not meant to be set in stone and say, okay, you are hereby sentenced for a lifetime of, of this SNRI or whatever it may be. It's not meant to be that way. The next thing that we like to look at is amino acid metabolism. I see that be a huge problem. And a lot of people are doing the right thing. Like they're doing hydrochloric acid and betaine to support that. But I just had a consult again today where they've been doing that, and they had a lot of polymorphisms in their ability to make choline. If you're not making choline, then you're not going to utilize your fats and your proteins effectively, and especially your fats. And when that happens, you're not going to be recycling your amino acids. There's going to be a lot of oxidation. There's going to be a lot of problems. You're not going to be able to make your immune cells. It's going to put a higher pressure on your ability to use the proteins that you're absorbing because you're taking HCl, but you're going to be depleting your immunoglobulins at a faster rate that you're repleting them, right? And if that happens, taking HCl is not going to fix that. It's just not. I mean, obviously having a healthy gut, having good integrity, good secretions, low dysbiosis, all very, very important. But what's the genetic component here, right? Are you upregulating your immune system's production of immunoglobulins? If you are, you need to support your immune system. And that typically looks at your ability to produce glutathione, and there's a lot of roadblocks to produce glutathione. So suffice it to say, one of the main things that your doctor is not going to be looking at is going to be looking at your homocysteine ratios or your numbers. In fact, today, again, I did another consult today, and on the lab ranges, 0 to 15 is the ranges for homocysteine. And I've never seen a 0. I've never seen a 1. I've never seen a 2. And that's to say, well, 0 to 15, 2 is the same as 14.9, and you're normal. You don't need to worry about it. That's wrong. I had someone today who was 3.9 on their homocysteine, and in the prior test, they were 5. And that's a huge, huge, huge problem. It's a huge problem because A, they're not recycling their SAMe. B, they're oxidizing their B12. C, they don't have enough gas in the tank to make glutathione. D, they're probably making a lot of ammonia. E, they're depleting their neurotransmitter BH4 raw material. Doctors don't even know that. They've never heard of that. They don't know what it is. There's no such thing as adrenal fatigue, right? So then the third thing that I wanted to talk about was BH4. So I've talked a lot about BH4. So BH4 is called biopterin. And biopterin is a necessary component to make a lot of things in your body. It's necessary to make nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is very, very, very important for a communicating messenger. It's important for vasodilation. It's important for mobilizing your immune system. And a lot of people will take nitric oxide for a lot of things, like the Viagra is nitric oxide. And so, however, BH4 is important to manufacture that, but BH4 is also important to manufacture all of your amino acids, all of your neurotransmitters, serotonin and dopamine, the main ones that we look at. And if your BH4 is not recycling, once it's been used to make all the things that it makes, then you're going to have neurotransmitter imbalances. You're going to have lack of motivation. You're going to have pain. You're going to have excitability. You're not going to be able to fall asleep. You're going to have panic disorders. You may have tremors. You may have OCD-like tendencies. All of the things that you're dealing with that you are calling neurotransmitter imbalances, your doctor's never heard of. They have heard of it, but they're not studying it. So there's other things, though, that will deplete your BH4. There's genetic polymorphism, so you want to look at that on your genetic test. You want to look at your nitric oxide levels. You can test that with home test strips. You want to make sure that you have adequate amounts of SOD, and you want to make sure that you have adequate amounts of glutathione and catalase and selenium. You want to make sure you're removing your ammonia, because if you're producing way too much ammonia because of the fact that you don't have enough maybe methyl groups, or you're eating way too much protein, and you're producing a lot of ammonia, you're going to deplete your BH4 also, because that's what it does. Very important information. The number 4 thing that we talked about is ammonia excess. So we just kind of segued into that, but ammonia is your body's way through the urea cycle to, to clear out and remove proteins from the body. And there's a lot of problems that go there: kidney problems, methylation issues, lack of raw materials, and too much protein, which we're all probably guilty of. And when that happens, that's going to deplete the raw materials that make your neurotransmitters. Hopefully that makes sense. And then lastly is that nitric oxide uncoupling. So what happens is, a lot of the times, when you don't have the super oxide dismutase available, or you have genetic polymorphisms, or you have way too much ammonia, or you don't have your micronutrients and your minerals in place, or there's heavy metals, or there's viruses, or there's all of the above, and all those things are happening, then what's going to happen is you're going to have the uncoupling of nitric oxide. And that basically means your BH4 is not going to have optimal partners in crime, so to speak, in order to make the transmitters, in order to make the nutrients that it needs to make, and that creates oxidized nutrients, and that creates inflammation, and that creates lots of problems. So those were the things I wanted to talk to you about today. Again, quick Facebook Live. Make sure you ask the questions in the comments, because when I do it through Zoom, I'm not able to see your questions, and I apologize about that. So if you said, hello, Dr. Rosen, I know a lot of people said that last time. I didn't say hi because I didn't see your comment. The other thing I wanted to tell you about is, people ask me about, hey, where do I test this? Well, there's a lot of different at-home tests. You can do nitric oxide testing. You can do sulfite and sulfate testings. Organic acid testing is great. Genetic testing is a no-brainer. And then blood testing, right? I mean, we talked about iron and looking at ferritin and looking at those values, and basically looking at the values from a more functional point of view, because there has to be a redefinition of exhaustion and fatigue. And you don't want to call it adrenal fatigue, that's fine. But let's at least address that there's the environment combining with the genetic susceptibilities, creating neurotransmitter imbalances that you're not going to fix with neurotransmitter support alone. It's helpful, but you're not going to fix it. So anyways, I always offer at the end of these Facebook Lives an opportunity to jump on the call with me, 45-minute no obligation consultation. You're going to go to the Truth About Adrenal Fatigue /apply. And that is for people that are serious. I look for 3 main things. Number 1, you have to be decisive. You have to know that this is a problem that is not going to fix itself. My doctors have never heard of those things you just mentioned today. And I want to see if that's something that I can fix with you, or how do I go about fixing it with who I already am seeing, so that I can get back to my life, because right now my life sucks. And it's really bad to live the way I am, to the point where it's more painful, more costly to not do anything. Those are the people. I don't want the people that are kicking tires, that are thinking, oh, it's not that bad of a problem. It is that bad of a problem, and you need to fix it. Number 2 is coachability. It's not a magic wand. It's not a magic bullet. It's not about taking this supplement or that supplement. It takes hard work and effort and determination, and you got to think of it like it's war. And unless you put your game face on, you're not going to fix this. It's a verb that needs to be done 24/7, and I need someone that's going to show up and do the work. And then lastly, the resourcefulness. I've talked about this before. Someone has to be resourceful. I work with people all over the world, not just the country, which I'm not saying that to brag, but obviously I'm not going to bill insurance in New Zealand, and I'm not going to bill insurance in Norway. And you've probably already had an impact of finances where you're spending $3,000 a month on supplements, or you've already spent $100,000 in doctor visits, or you've already, missed, $300,000 of working, not working at full capacity for the last 10 years. I mean, those are the things where you realize that, hey, it's a small drop in the bucket to what I spent in order to get my life back. So if that sounds like you, then let's get on the call and figure out what you're missing. The link again is The Truth About Adrenal Fatigue, all one word, /apply. Hope you got a lot of value out of this call today. My name is Dr. Joel Rosen. I am the Adrenal Fatigue Recovery Ninja, and I look forward to ending your adrenal fatigue nightmare. Have a great day.